Have you ever heard the Bible story of Esther? Well, here it is. Once upon a time in ancient Persia, the king's wife, Queen Vashti, was having a huge party. Like one of those really big parties with all the fancy food, beautiful decorations, and everyone dressed up in their finest robes. But then the king had an idea. He wanted to show off how hot his wife was. So he told his servants to get Queen Vashti to come out and show herself to all the guests. But Queen Vashti refused. She didn't want to be shown off like a prized possession. And so King Xerxes was furious. He called for his wise men, but even they couldn't figure out what to do. So the king came up with a new plan. He would have a contest where all the single women in the kingdom would be invited to come and participate. Whoever won would become the new queen. One of the women who entered the competition was a young Jewish girl named Esther, who was known for her beauty and kindness. She lived in the city of Susa with her cousin Mordecai, who had raised her like a father after her parents died. But Esther had a secret. She was actually Jewish, but no one knew it, not even the king. She hid it because being Jewish wasn't very popular back then. When it was Esther's turn to see the king, she wowed him with her beauty and grace. She became the new queen, but she still kept her Jewish identity a secret. Meanwhile, Haman, one of the king's top advisors, was fuming. He was a mean guy who hated the Jews, and when he found out that Esther was Jewish, he hatched a wicked plan to get rid of her and all the Jews in the empire. He convinced the king to sign a decree that gave him permission to wipe out the entire Jewish population. After reading the king's order, Mordecai was heartbroken. He told Esther that if she didn't do something, the Jews would be killed. But she was scared. If she revealed her identity as a Jew and asked the king to cancel the order, he might not listen and could even have her put to death. It was a huge risk. Mordecai begged Esther to go and plead with the king, but she replied, "Don't ask me to save myself by going to see the king. If I'm not careful and he gets mad at me, I could be put to death. And what can I do? I haven't seen him for a long time." But Mordecai said, "You can't just sit back and do nothing. Who knows? You might be the one who saves all the Jews." Then he sent her this message. "Who knows if you will find favor in the eyes of the king, or who of your relatives will perish? Yet in this situation, you are the one who has come to the kingdom for such a time as this." Those words stuck with Esther. She knew that being queen had given her a unique opportunity to do something really important. So she decided to take a chance and reveal her identity to the king. First, though, she needed to throw a massive party, inviting the king and Haman. She wanted to expose Haman's evil plot before it was too late. As the party was in full swing, Esther made an announcement. She said, "We Jews have been ordered to be wiped out, and Haman is the one behind it all." The king was furious when he heard this. He ripped up Haman's evil order and had Haman put to death. Then he made a new decree, protecting the Jews and allowing them to defend themselves against any who would harm them. News of this decree spread quickly, and the Jews were prepared to fight back. When Haman's sons, Darda, Balasha, and Zohar, heard what had happened, they gathered a group of soldiers to attack the Jews. But God was on the side of the Jews. He gave them the strength and courage to defeat their enemies. In the end, the Jewish people won the battle, and Esther saved her people from destruction. But let's rewind a little. After Esther exposed Haman's plot, a man named Mordecai wrote down everything that had happened and sent copies to all the Jews throughout the empire, told them to remember this day and celebrate it every year as the day they were saved from destruction. This holiday became known as Purim, which means lots of noisy celebration. The book that tells the story of Esther is called the Book of Esther. It's part of the Old Testament in the Bible. And even though it doesn't mention God directly, many believe that God was still in control and working through Esther to save his people. Some think God didn't want to be too obvious about it, so that the Jews wouldn't rely on him to save them in the future. Instead, God showed that he could work through ordinary people like Esther, a young Jewish woman who was just trying to live her life in a foreign land. Even though she was scared and didn't know if her plan would work, she took a leap of faith and trusted that God would help her. Because of her bravery, the Jewish people were able to survive and continue their worship of God. In our own lives, we sometimes have to be brave and stand up for what we believe in, even when we're scared. Like when someone's being bullied and needs a friend to stand up for them. When someone needs to speak out against injustice. Or when someone feels called to share their faith with others. We may not always know how things will turn out, but we can trust that God will give us the strength and courage to do what's right. Esther is a good example for us to follow. She was a hero who wasn't perfect, but who was willing to take a risk for what she believed in. Now I want to tell you another story about bravery and faith. Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between rolling hills and a sparkling lake, there lived a young boy named Caleb. Caleb wasn't like the other kids in town. He had red hair, freckled skin, and wore mismatched shoes. The other kids called him names and said he smelled funny because he always wore the same clothes. They also thought he was weird because he always talked about God. One day, some boys challenged Caleb to jump into the lake. They wanted to see if he'd float or sink, but Caleb wasn't afraid, jumped right in, and when he came up, they all gasped. You see, Caleb's clothes were water repellent because they were coated with beeswax. He stayed afloat, and the other kids couldn't believe it. Caleb was different, yes, but he was strong, smart, and kind. And the other kids realized that being different wasn't a bad thing. In fact, it made Caleb special. From that day on, they became friends and learned to accept each other for who they were. If you want to hear more stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Do you know someone who's different but awesome? Share this video with them, and let's appreciate being different together.